Hello, everyone. My name is Ari, and I'm a quantum hardware engineer at IBM, where I work on scaling quantum control systems so that we can build bigger and more practical quantum computers. And I don't have a PhD, and I never went to an Ivy League university or a top 10 university. And guess what? Neither of my parents have bachelor's degrees. So if you want to work in the quantum computing field, you might have seen all the people online who, always have a physics PhD or who went to an Ivy League or a top 10 university. And ultimately, I'm making this video to serve as an example of somebody who does not have that background, but who also still works in quantum computing. But I don't necessarily do, the things that you think of generally, at least when you start doing some basic research into quantum computing. When you go online and you type in how to get into quantum computing, things like Qiskit show up, things like quantum algorithms show up. Things like quantum information theory show up. But I don't really do any of that on the day-to-day. Ultimately, what I work on is I'm in the lab running experiments. I'm running experiments on qubits. I'm running experiments on experimental control electronics for those qubits. I get in the lab and I use oscilloscopes and spectrum analyzers and all sorts of crazy lab equipment. I run a dilution refrigerator where I'm leading experiments on the latest and most cutting edge quantum control electronics for our qubits. So again, the main purpose of this video is to show you an alternative path into starting to work in quantum computing that doesn't require a PhD or doesn't require some Ivy League education. My journey started all the way back in my high school physics class, where I had an amazing physics teacher who really inspired a lot of love and enthusiasm for science. I had always been the kid who liked science class. Science was always my best subject. It was something that I was passionate about from a young age. But this teacher really inspired some of my love for physics. This class was really my first stab at problems that were really challenging and were getting towards some of the more fundamental ways that the world around us works. And don't get me wrong, I was not a genius whatsoever. I was not the smart kid in the class. We all know that guy who just doesn't study and comes into class and doesn't pay attention and then gets 100% on the test. We all know that person. I am definitely not that person. And in fact, my first test that we had in that physics class, I actually failed. I failed it, right? And luckily the teacher was nice and he let me retake it. And after that, I studied very hard. I worked very hard to understand the core concepts and what we were doing. And then I got a really good grade. And then from there on out, I only got good grades in that class because it kind of recalibrated how I needed to work and how I needed to think about the work that I was doing. And ultimately, I got very good grades in high school and in college, but it wasn't because I was just the smart kid who had this raw, gifted intelligence. It was because I had to work very hard. I worked very hard for all the grades that I got. I worked very hard for all the knowledge that I accumulated. It wasn't just something that I naturally was gifted at. So towards the end of this physics class in high school, we were introduced to some of the more outlandish sides of physics, like relativity and quantum mechanics, just very basically, right? And we touched on some of the applications of quantum physics, which were quantum computing. And so I started to do a little bit more research on it. And I, at first, as a little high schooler, found it very interesting. I had always loved tinkering with computers and working with computers. And probably much like many of you out there, you built your own computer to play video games on when you were younger. I would often dumpster dive for old electronics and pick parts out of them and fix them and either sell them or give them away to people. I just enjoyed kind of being in that technical landscape and working with computers and tinkering around with stuff. So I had ultimately kind of known before going into college that I wanted to work with computers in some way, shape, or form, right? And when you go and kind of start exploring majors, computer engineering or computer science is kind of a logical one to start going toward. And now that I started to learn about quantum computing, I started to see how this emerging technology, something that was still in the research phase, could eventually, with lots of development, start to greatly impact the world. And I knew that I wanted to work on something like that. So I kind of started in the back of my mind thinking, okay, what if I could potentially work in quantum computing as a career, right? It kind of combines my love for technology and science and computers all together and allows me to work on something that would have a great impact on the world. It seemed like I was alive and born at the right time to kind of start studying and get into it. However, I started to see online and see the type of people that worked in quantum computing, and it just didn't seem like those type of people fit my profile, right? Those people were people with PhDs in physics who only really wanted to study physics, who went really deep into the science, who potentially have gone to MIT, Harvard, top 10 university, right? And I was just going to the University of Wisconsin. So it didn't seem necessarily like it was feasible for me because I knew it was very competitive, of course, very competitive. So why would they pick some random kid from Wisconsin who was going to a state school over somebody from Harvard or MIT who was studying physics, who was getting a PhD? So I kind of filed it away in the back of my mind that, it would be cool to work in quantum computing, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I went into my freshman year of college at the University of Wisconsin thinking that quantum computing and working in quantum computing was kind of just a dream. So I chose computer engineering as my major, and I figured that I would just go into some sort of career that involved some sort of hardware engineering, like maybe computer architecture, or even maybe I would go into software engineering or something like that. I went through the first 3 semesters of college just kind of doing the standard computer and electrical engineering classes like signals and basic math and physics and stuff like that. Circuits, all those kind of fun classes, right? I still had this notion like maybe I can work in quantum computing in the back of my head, but it was very, very small. And to kind of see or understand if that is actually something that I wanted to do, I decided to take a leap of faith and take a class that computer engineers did not have to take, and most computer engineers never took this class. It was a modern physics class that was specifically for electrical engineers who wanted to go deeper into device physics. And the class focused a lot on quantum mechanics and solid state physics that were applicable to kind of that area of device physics, right? And I get in the class, and it's, again, a wonderful teacher, and I absolutely love the class, right? I think the notion of quantum mechanics and learning about kind of those basics was very, very exciting to me. It felt like I was gaining a more fundamental understanding of the world, and it also supplemented some of the basic research that I was doing on quantum computing just as, some young college kid researching online, right? I absolutely loved that class. And so it almost gave me a little bit of a push and reinvigorated me and said, okay, maybe this quantum computing dream is a little bit of a possibility, is a little possibility, right? So in this class, I was performing exceptionally well, one of the best students in that class at the time. And oftentimes my friend and I would go and talk to the professor after class about the content and topics and career stuff. Thankfully, I actually went to a school that had some sort of quantum computing presence. There's professors that do all sorts of research in different hardware paradigms. There's researchers in algorithms, there's researchers in quantum computing architecture. So I saw that there was an opportunity to perhaps get involved in quantum computing with some of these people at my university. So what I did, which is probably what many people do all the time, is send a bunch of emails out to those professors and ask for a research experience, right? And of course, none of them responded to me. Literally 0 responded to me. I sent out a bunch of emails, I waited, none responded to me. So in one of those days when I went and talked to the professor after this physics class, I had realized like, hey, I really want to get a research experience. I have all these skills. I thought I'd be a good fit. I emailed all these professors and none of them responded to me. And she said, you know what, I will reach out to a few of my colleagues that you emailed and I will let them know that you're interested and that you're doing well in the class, right? So she did. And then literally within minutes of her sending the email, I got a response from one of the professors that was like, oh, Ari, I would love to talk to you, right? And so my physics professor would have never done that for me if I hadn't been performing well in the class, if I hadn't been putting forth effort. So after that, professor emailed me saying that he wanted to chat with me. I got on a Zoom call with him, and the rest was history after that. He said that I could start working in the lab this upcoming fall semester, and I was like blown away. I remember that day after I talked to him, like, oh my gosh, like this spark, this dream of getting into, working on quantum technology, this is reinvigorated now, finally. This is my first real step into the field, my first real experience, and potentially, getting a job and building a career in quantum computing is possible. I want to take a moment to back up a little bit, actually, in the story and say that I almost did not go to the University of Wisconsin. I almost went to the Milwaukee School of Engineering, which is like kind of a smaller school, much smaller school, and doesn't really have a big presence, doesn't really have a big namesake, and doesn't really have a lot of faculty doing research, at least as much as the University of Wisconsin does. And so that would have been probably the biggest mistake of my life, because then I would not have been afforded the opportunity to work in quantum computing in one of those quantum computing research labs. There just wasn't that opportunity at the university. So if you were to ask me, comparing a small school with small class sizes where your classmates better and your professors better, maybe you get a slightly better education that way versus a large school with a lot of opportunity. I would always choose the large school with a lot of opportunity, because ultimately your classes are going to be hit or miss anyway, depending on the professor, at least in my opinion. And what makes college and university something that is so valuable is not just the classes, but the other opportunity that you are afforded by being there. For example, like research and having faculty in all sorts of different domains do research, and you can work with them and gain experience in that field. Okay, so back to the story. I started working for that professor then the first fall semester of my junior year, and that lab focused on neutral atom quantum computing, where essentially you use a bunch of really expensive lasers and optical elements to turn neutral atoms like rubidium and cesium into qubits. And so what I did for that lab was basically just a bunch of engineering work and like things like mechanical design, electrical design, like making little circuits and, making little optical elements and aligning optics for the experiments and whatnot. Broadly focused on like kind of control systems for those experiments in the lab that allow them to do the science basically on those neutral atoms, right? And basically build a quantum computer rather than the neutral atoms. And along the way, I learned a lot from the grad students and the professor about some of the subtle physics nuances that surround this neutral atom quantum computing. It was really just a way of learning through osmosis, learning through experience, and watching people do all this crazy physics in order to make these quantum computers work. So this was ultimately a wonderful learning experience for me. But in addition to the lab work, I knew that I wanted to gain industry experiences. So I kept doing internships. I kept looking for internships because ultimately I knew that if I want to understand what I want to do in the future, I need to get some experience with that before I kind of make that final decision. And also still in the back of my mind, even though I was working in a quantum computing lab, I didn't necessarily think that it was a possibility still. So during the time of internship hunting season, my university hosted these career fairs where you could go and talk one-on-one to a representative of a company. And this was just kind of after the COVID years. So this career fair was remote, virtual, right? So you could essentially sign up for a time slot and just talk with a representative from a company and ask questions, right? Get to know each other. And so I saw IBM was one of those companies that was joining. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know what? IBM does quantum computing. Why don't I just like go in there and talk to this guy? Let's see who I get. And IBM is a very, very big company, right? Large company. They do all sorts of stuff. Like the quantum computing division of IBM is minuscule compared to like the grand scope of IBM and what they do worldwide, right? So I could have literally been matched with anyone. Turns out I got matched with somebody who manages a team that works on room temperature quantum control electronics. And I did not know that at the time at all. So I started talking to him about my passion for quantum computing, wanting to work in the quantum computing field, and how I've been developing skills already in the lab, in the neutral atom quantum computing lab, and also through my coursework, and how I think that I can potentially apply some of those electrical engineering, computer engineering skills to the field of quantum. So after weeks of waiting around and not really hearing anything back from anyone, applying to other internships, interviewing for other positions, I actually got a text message from the same guy. He was like, hey, do you want to work for IBM this summer? Are you still interested? We'd like to talk to you again. So I actually had a deadline for another offer that I had to sign. So I was like, yeah, can you guys talk today? I have to sign an offer tomorrow. So I got on a call with this guy and then his manager, and they were able to quickly turn the HR wheels and get me an offer out that same night, right? We decided that it was a good mutual fit. I was incredibly stoked at that point. I was like, okay, wow, this is now an industry experience at IBM, right? The leader in quantum computing. So this internship was in Rochester, Minnesota, working on room temperature control electronics. And those room temperature control electronics send out microwave pulses so that we can control and read out the qubits. And that was honestly an awesome experience that summer. I loved that experience. It was really my first real hardware experience too. I had done software internships before, but this was my first hardware internship, and I realized, yeah, I like the hardware aspect of stuff a lot more. And within that team where we developed that stuff in Rochester, Minnesota, there was just a whole host of different people from all sorts of different backgrounds, whether it's like FPGA engineering or firmware and software engineering, circuit design, hardware design, all sorts of stuff, power engineering, signal integrity, RF engineering, all sorts of cool electrical engineering stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think, at first at least, somebody with that background would work in quantum computing. Yet there was this massive team all working in quantum computing, developing these control systems specifically for the qubits. So after seeing all that, during that summer, I honestly decided I wanted to go much deeper into my studies. I didn't want to just finish with a bachelor's degree. I wanted to go a little bit deeper and get a master's degree. So what I was planning on doing was doing 4 full years of school, getting 2 majors and 2 minors, computer engineering, computer science, doing a physics minor and a math minor. And I figured, what's the whole point of doing all that extra stuff, right? There's no sense in doing it. So what I did instead was I dropped all the extra major, I dropped those minors, and I just got my bachelor's degree in computer engineering. And what that allowed me to do is graduate a little bit early so that I could start a master's degree right away. So during my undergrad, right, before the internships, like in between the internships and whatnot, I took some advanced graduate level classes, I took some quantum classes, some special quantum engineering classes, some extra quantum physics classes, more physics classes, more kind of stuff that related to quantum computing or related to the science than I necessarily had to as a computer engineer. So as a result, I accumulated some graduate level credits that would count towards my master's degree and allow me to finish it earlier than usual. So during that summer, I made the decision to drop all the extra majors and minors and just focus on finishing my computer engineering degree so that I can then delve deeper within my master's degree and really only take the classes that I actually cared about, right? Yes, I could have got a physics minor and a computer science degree and a math minor, right? But I was just taking those classes just to get the major and minor, right? It wasn't actually something that was valuable to me personally besides the extra piece of paper that you get, right? So that decision was also very important too, because what it allowed me to do was get another summer's worth of internship, right? And so after I expressed my new plan to my manager, I said, hey, I want to get closer to the qubits. I want to get closer to the actual quantum computers. And is there any way that, you could help me get an internship at the TJ Watson Research Center in New York at IBM where they have these quantum systems? And he actually liked that idea. He liked that idea a lot. So, I left that summer not knowing where I was going to go next summer, but I guess behind the scenes, he made some things work. I had some conversations with people out in the Yorktown office of IBM. And after some of those conversations, we decided that there was a good project for me out there. And I got the offer to come back as another intern next summer. So before going into my next IBM internship, I have 2 semesters of school. And so during that time, I decided to start the quantum computing club at my university. I saw that there was a physics club, but there really wasn't a place where people could come together and talk about quantum computing and support each other in their journeys, right? I had realized firsthand that there's a lot of people who might think that quantum computing is an impossible career to get in. And after that internship in Rochester, Minnesota, where I saw there's tons and tons of pathways into the field that aren't just get a physics PhD from an Ivy League university and then eventually do quantum computing research, there was all these electrical engineering and software engineering and computer engineering pathways that lead to a career in quantum computing. And I wanted to kind of talk about that and provide a place where people could support each other and talk about quantum computing and, talk about the different ways that you could get into quantum computing. And honestly, I regret not starting the club sooner. That was one of the most fulfilling experiences that I had all throughout my educational career. Extremely fulfilling. I loved doing that. I learned so much. It really took me out of my comfort zone and helped me develop organic and real and authentic leadership skills and communication skills and stuff like that. So now we're at my second IBM internship, this time in New York at the TJ Watson Research Center. And during this internship, I worked on the transmission lines that actually send the microwave signals to the qubits. And this summer, honestly, was incredible. I learned so much from all the people around me. I got so much good experience actually working with the hardware, getting closer to the quantum systems. And I realized that this was a place that I wanted to be. I loved the location. I loved the people. I loved the environment. And I knew that long term, this would be something that I would really enjoy working at. And the whole point of an internship essentially for a company is to kind of interview a candidate for a long period of time and determine if they're somebody that they want to bring back. And so, throughout that, I was doing really good work on my project, but it happened that the manager that I was working under, his team broadly really didn't have much to do with what I was working on and what my interests were. And so ultimately what has to happen if an intern is going to become a full-time person, there has to be a good match between the manager and the team and the intern, right? So even though I was doing a good job and people were happy with my work and he was happy with my work, I just wasn't a good fit for his team. So in having that conversation and knowing that, I set out to kind of find a good fit, right? I wanted to talk to all sorts of different people, different managers, different people in different research areas, and understand where could I fit in, given my interests and given my skill set. So that's exactly what I did, right? I connected with a bunch of managers. There was one that I initially talked to him, and I honestly thought it went really bad. But we kind of came to the conclusion that why don't I go and talk to a bunch of people on his team and try to understand what they do, and then understand if my skill set could help them. How could I help them, essentially? So I did exactly that. I went and I talked to a bunch of people on his team. I really listened. I was very interested, actually. I started learning that, what they were doing was incredibly interesting to me. It was something that, combined all of my interests in what I've been studying, what I've been trying to hone in on in my master's degree. Ultimately seemed like a great fit. So I came to him with, multiple pages in my notebook of, things that I could do to help each individual one of these team members. And ultimately, we came to the conclusion that it was a good mutual fit. And after lots of waiting, I was able to get a full-time return offer to come work at IBM at the TJ Watson Research Center, working on control electronics and scaling control electronics so that we can build bigger, better, more practical quantum computers. So I hope this video shows you that you do not necessarily need to have a PhD or to have gone to a Ivy League university or a top 10 university in order to work in quantum computing. There are multiple different pathways to get into quantum computing, and one of them happens to be broadly the electrical engineering, computer engineering route, and that's the one that I took. So in this video, I also wanted to show you that this wasn't necessarily an easy process. And there was a lot of doubt in my mind throughout the entire thing. It was iterative, right? I went from, just an idea, right? I want to work in quantum computing to, okay, I'm going to take a quantum physics class. Okay, then I'm going to work in a lab. I'm going to work really hard to try to get an experience in a lab. And then I'm going to leverage that lab experience to try to get me an internship, and then get me another internship, and then finally a full-time job, right? It wasn't just, I'm born smart and I studied the right things and boom, now I'm a quantum physicist, right? It was something that I had to deliberately work towards and put in a lot of effort over many years in order to make it happen. Each stage required a lot of hard work and dedication because the quantum computing industry and that whole landscape is highly competitive, right? We have to have good people with good skills if we want to develop this technology. And so what I did is try to understand what skills I needed to develop and the person I needed to become in order to have a tangible impact on the technology. Because ultimately, I wanted to work on something that I thought would have a great impact on the world. And quantum computing, I believe, is one of those things that will eventually, once we're able to scale it up, will have a large impact, large positive impact on the world. Ultimately, you can do it as long as you put in the work to develop yourself, develop the right skills, and put effort towards working on something that's going to make the world better. That's exactly why at the end of every video that I make, I say, do good work. So do good work, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.